Spain, the superpower of expansion and conquest. These men were driven by religion, riches, glory, fame. They were the conquerors of the New World. Even though they weren't the first, they were the ones who pretty much left the biggest impact. Let's talk about that. Oh, Missy Y'all, are we going to talk about El Dorado? Oh, me from the past, how ignorant and impulsive you were. Yes, Coronado did try to find this magical city of gold, but other than being an animated movie from the year 2000, all it was a myth. Now, before we launch into the control that Spain actually had over the Americas, let's talk a little bit about how they had to get there. Spain is located on the Iberian Peninsula. It's sandwiched right between Portugal and France, so you can tell other conquerors came from around that region too. Spain was divided into two kingdoms for a long time, Castile and Aragon. Wait, Aragon? Oh my god, Aragon, wait. You mean to tell me that this is the mystical land where people rode dragons all the time and had wonderful dragon fights and stuff?
No, Aragon was the eastern side of Spain, and that's Algacia you're thinking of.
What? No. Oh. No. Why? Why, Yasmeen? Darn it. Why? Why do you always have to go and ruin history for me? It's supposed to be cool with dragons and knights and fighting, but no, you just have to make it boring. Anyway, when Isabella married King Ferdinand, they unified Spain, and Isabella was starting to, install her forces in there. She was incredibly religiously zealous. She wanted everyone to be at least a Christian, but it was even better if they were Catholic. So she was really imposing the Inquisition on everybody. And in sending the conquistadors, Isabella sent this style of religious Catholic domination to the Americas. Spain sent many explorers and conquistadors to the New World to bring them back riches. They granted these men a lot more men to, follow them as they went to explore the New World, except the conditions were that any gold, silver, jade, anything that could help, in theory, better the economy but really destroyed it, would have to come back to the crown. Let's go to the thought bubble.
Spain differed greatly from the other European conquerors of the New World, namely England and France. The English didn't want to interact much with the natives and mostly stayed behind the walls they had built, and the French were very open and traded with the natives. Spain, however, forced the natives to convert to Catholicism and then made them work in the silver mines. Those fierce enough to resist were massacred, and weaker Indians were brought in to take their place as laborers. And the Spanish thought they were entitled to this. A conquistador of Peru said, "No other race can be found that can penetrate through such rugged lands, such dense forests, such great mountains and deserts, and cross such broad rivers as the Spaniards have done, solely by the valor of their persons and the forcefulness of their breed." The natives weren't so happy. An Aztec poet said, "We are crushed to the ground, we lie in ruins. There is nothing but grief and suffering in Mexico and Tlatelolco, where once we saw beauty and valor." Once Spain started going to the Americas, they contributed to the Triangle of Trade. They would stop in Africa for slaves and ivory, take those to go work in the Americas and get silver, sugar, and other raw materials, and then take those back to Europe to get various manufactured goods to give back to Africa in return for slaves.
Once the Spanish actually started establishing themselves in Mexico, they developed a bureaucratic system of government very similar to that of China, except instead of having, bureaucrats, they had these things called viceroys, which were sort of like mini kings controlling different viceroyalties. Now let's get away from all that political stuff and get into the real reason Spain started expanding into the Americas. Economic reasons. One of the coolest things Spain found in the Americas was silver. It was just mind-blowing to them that all this silver could be in the Americas. They found mountains made of silver. So how does one extract all this silver? You get free Indian labor. Excellent. Between 1545 and 1565 was the main high point of the silver industry in the Americas. And the reason behind getting all the silver was to trade with Eastern Asia, particularly China. Since most of their coins were made of silver, they started to get a little, more open towards European traders once Latin America became under Spanish rule. Other than silver, the Spanish, or at least their native miners, found another special metal in the mines, and this one wasn't in a solid state. It was mercury. This mercury was called azogue in those times, and it was used to make the silver a little less pure, treat it, because otherwise it would hurt the economy a little too much. I mean, it didn't save it that much, but they need to clean it and stuff. However, this mercury led to a new way to kill the native population, because those in the mines who did not die from the collapsing of the mines now died from mercury poisoning. Hooray, that killed off a huge percentage of the population, and that's why the Spanish had to start stopping in Africa to pick up some African slaves to do the work that they had originally planned for the natives. So at this time, it seems like nothing could go wrong for Spain. What could possibly go wrong? Everything could possibly go wrong, especially economically. I mean, once all the silver came back to Spain, Spain started getting really lazy. They thought the silver was this huge safety net and they didn't need to manufacture anything anymore. They didn't need to export. So they started importing everything from other countries and giving their silver to these other countries. And Spain started suffering because, they weren't making any money anymore. They were just losing it. They just were not prepared for this, except in turn, the other countries who they gave their silver to, their economies also suffered because when you give this much money to anybody, the economy is going to become unstable. Nobody's used to being this rich. People are going to get lazy. They're going to want to import instead of export, just like Spain did. So basically, Europe was a little, right now. They weren't really that good. Now, when Europe tried to get rid of all this money, Spain, earlier gave it to China, and so China had a lot of silver, and that caused a war. I mean, it was the Opium Wars. England, probably forgetting about all the stuff that happened to Spain when they got too much silver, wanted silver from China, so they were like, hey China, why don't we sell you opium? So, other than all this economic stuff, there's also a huge social aspect to what conquering the Americas had to do for Spain, and it established a new social hierarchy. I mean, in Spain it was still pretty much the same, but since Spain had acquired all this new land, they needed to establish some sort of order. Now, the Indians, or natives, if you want to be more politically correct, who were living there, they had their own hierarchy, so what did Spain do? They just kind of, changed it to put them at the top and just left everyone else the same. But really, what mattered was that people who were born in Spain were the Peninsulares, and they were at the top. They made all the decisions. They could treat everyone else however they wanted to. The Creoles were the people who were born in the Americas, but of Spanish parents, and they were, right underneath them. They didn't get as much rights, but they still got to boss a lot of other people around. The Mestizos were Spanish mixed with the natives, and once they brought African slaves over, there were mulattoes, which were Spanish mixed with the Africans. And, the Indians, they had their own social hierarchies as well. The nobility for the Indians, they could be middlemen, except, if you were the lowest of the natives, then, you pretty much had a horrible time. Now, this entire system was totally unfair to the American Indians, but the Spanish really didn't care up until now because, they were the Spanish, they had God's will, all of that stuff. They just really didn't think they needed to care. But in the mid-1500s, Bartolomé de las Casas, he got this unfair untreatment, is that even a word?
No, it's not, Sophie. Untreatment is not a word.
Unfair treatment of these American Indians. He called it out to the monarchs and he told them, hey, these people aren't animals. They are not totally barbaric. They are actually very civilized. They had these huge cities and stuff. We should not be treating them this badly. And the monarchs actually got these laws passed, except, nobody really upholded those laws. You might be asking me, if these people were the Spanish monarchs, why would they want to give up some of their power in the New World? Well, the monarchs are actually starting to get a little afraid of these things called encomiendas, and what these were these huge plantations given to Spanish nobility when they would be given a grant of native workers, and they actually started to get very rich and powerful, and the monarchs were kind of afraid of them. So when Bartolomé gave his huge plea to the monarchs to please be nice to these natives, they saw it as an easy way out of all this, challenging to their reign. So they were like, yes, Bartolomé, go ahead, let's make these laws. So the Indians, despite having all of this horrible stuff done to them, they were quite resilient. I mean, their culture still exists today in Mexico and Peru and all of those Latin American countries. Although it's not, the main thing that people think of when they think of Latin America, they think of beaches and, carnival, all that stuff. The culture still remains. It has survived all of this time. So now, let's get to the religious standpoint of it all, which is probably where the most brutal things happen to those poor natives. Spain kind of played on the Indians because in Mexico, when they were trying to conquer the Aztecs, one of the Aztec gods, his humanoid, is humanish a word or is humanoid the word?
I think it's humanoid.
Humanoid, okay.
Humane.
Thanks, Yasmeen.
Humane. I think it's humane.
Okay, thanks, Yasmeen. The humanoid form of the god was light-skinned, wearing this bright, shiny armor, so when Cortez came towards the Aztecs, they were totally in awe of him. I mean, first they had no idea what was going on. They saw these moving mountains, but really they were just his ships. But when they saw him emerge, they were all like, it's our god, let's serve him. And Cortez, being as sneaky as he was like, I can use this. So he took out the priest caste, because he was like, since I'm here, you don't need the priest caste to follow me. And he just merged the remaining natives with the Spanish idea of the social caste. And what Spain tried to do was convert these barbarians to Christianity, and they used the ideas of the Inquisition. The Indians were garroted to death, they were tortured, their religious texts and drawings were burned. Those who resisted were, just totally harmed or killed, and basically that's why Catholicism is the main religion you see when you go to Latin America now. Which reminds me, it's time for the open letter. Apparition. Magic. An open letter to Cortez and Pizarro. But first, let's see what's in the secret compartment. It's not very secret, there's a question mark box. I mean, they're all over Mario. Ah, I don't care, let's see what's in. Didn't open. Fine, I'll open the boring way. Oh look, it's a fake silver coin. And a fake mustache. Really? Really, guys? A fake... Okay. You know what? I'll put it on because I'm a good sport. Oh, a sombrero. Where'd this come on? Yasmeen! Why did you give me a fake mustache? The fake mustache was enough, okay? But never mind. This looks more like the Mexican Revolution style of hat. But anyway, dear Cortez and Pizarro. Cortez, we get it. You were a great explorer and conquistador and all, but why did you have to be so diabolical when you defeated the Aztecs? Sure, they were the ones who actually believed you were a god in the first place, but why did you have to fool them for so long? They probably would still have treated you nicely, considering the fact that they never really had seen anyone like you before. I mean, the threat of scary horses certainly would have helped. You seemed all benevolent and, kind at first, and how you would be their god, and you just were so great to them, but then you just destroyed them all with your insidious germs and steel weapons! And then you had to write all of these wonderful accomplishments down in this great big book, available in Spanish library so future conquistadors could read it and get inspired and go massacre some more natives. It's like giving a friend test answers so they can get a better grade than you. Who does that? And Pizarro? Why'd you have to cheat and use Cortez's great big book of slaughtering advice to annihilate the Incas? Those guys seem awesome and really cool, but we'll never know now, will we? Best wishes, Sofie Ayala. And now it's time for the big picture conclusion, like every big crash course inspiring video has. So let's talk a little bit more about the economic influence I had mentioned earlier. Inflation. It was just so bad that it led to the Opium Wars, and it was just not good. However, Latin America did do very well in the future. I mean, because of the Spanish influence, they were able to grow as a society, and even though most of the natives did get killed, they did get new ideas, new technology, new ways to govern themselves, so it was able to grow into this region of the world that we know today. Also, the Spanish language was a huge impact on the world. I mean, every country in Latin America except Brazil speaks Spanish as the official language now. If it's not the kid's first language, of course, he or she will learn it in school and grow up speaking it. Other countries that are not in Latin America, like the Philippines, have it as their native language. I mean, English is the official language of the Philippines now, but because of the Philippines being under Spanish influence for so long, a lot of people speak Spanish. So the question here is, Spain did have both good and bad influences, good being the contribution of language and culture and, industrialization of various parts of Latin America, and the bad being, the massacre of thousands of natives. So the question, the aforementioned question, would be, was Spain's influence, or not just Spain, all of Europe's influence in the Americas and the conquest and everything, was it for good or for bad? I mean, think about it, where would Latin America be now? The natives who were living there did not change much over the whole course of time. Europe changed much faster, and they had so much more ideas at the time. I mean, that's not to say the natives were not a good society. I mean, they did have a lot of math and science concepts, but really, think about the way the world would be now if the Americas and Europe did not mix until a much later date. It's strange the way the world works, isn't it?
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this crash course. Our executive producer is Fer Contreras, our producer is Yasmeen Tizani, our writer/historian is Laura Bryant, our associate producer is Gabe Ziegelboim, our editor is me, Sofie Ayala, and our sound guy/cameraman is Michael Stankard.